On the streets of Ukraine, civilians are caught in the crossfire, or worse, targeted intentionally.
We've seen very credible reports of deliberate attacks on civilians.
As the army of Russian President Vladimir Putin wages battle across the country, it's worth remembering that in war, not everything is fair.
Video released by the Ukrainian government appears to show civilians being caught in an attack on a government building.
Russian forces have brutally fired on Kharkiv from rocket artillery.
If civilians were targeted, that would be a war crime.
So where exactly is the line between acceptable collateral damage and a war crime? That's where the Geneva Conventions come in. Though negotiations date back to the late 19th century, the Geneva Conventions were adopted by just about every country on Earth at the end of the Second World War and outlined the rules of armed conflict within a set of 4 basic agreements. The first deals with fighting on the ground. Wounded soldiers are to be allowed medical treatment. Relief organizations such as the International Committees of the Red Cross and Red Crescent are given access to treat the wounded, and medical facilities and personnel are not to be targeted. Additionally, the dead are to be collected from the battlefield and returned whenever possible. The second convention deals with fighting at sea. It applies the same principles as the first convention to soldiers who are wounded, sick, and shipwrecked. The third applies to prisoners of war. Those captured in the course of a conflict are to be treated humanely, meaning they are to receive adequate food, shelter, and medical care, and should never be subjected to torture, execution, or sexual violence. And they must be released promptly following the end of the war. The fourth and final convention is all about civilians. All of the same rules for soldiers apply to non-combatants, and there are even more protections designed to minimize the impact on innocent populations. Occupying forces are not allowed to impede food and medical supplies, and civilians are not to be intentionally targeted in any way, either in their homes or while fleeing the conflict.
Russia and Ukraine have agreed to create humanitarian corridors,
allowing those thousands of people who've been stuck because of the Russian shelling and firing to come out.
Whoever can get out needs to get out.
These rules are enforced by international humanitarian and criminal law and exist not only to prevent the worst at the worst of times, but also provide a pathway to peace. The idea is that by limiting suffering, there's less chance for what humanitarian organizations call insurmountable grievances, or crimes against a population that simply cannot be forgiven once the war is over.